Hello and welcome to Moneylife. Let's discuss an interesting comparison today. I'm going to talk about two companies. We've already talked about Jet Airways, which is how not to handle a bad loan, and we'll talk about Shree Renuka Sugars and look at how things work in India. We are living in difficult times. When this government came to power, we had the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, better known as the Bankruptcy Law, which was supposed to be the ultimate answer to resolving all bad loans. In the beginning, things worked wonderfully well. Lots of cases got resolved. The steel sector especially had a lot of demand. But at the end of 3 years, the law completes 3 years in May 2019. Let's take stock. Just about 1400 cases have gone to the National Companies Law Tribunal, which is supposed to decide on insolvency cases, out of which about 40% have been closed. Now, closed doesn't necessarily mean resolved. Believe it or not, just 2 cases have had a spectacular resolution. One of these was, of course, Bhushan Steel, acquired by the Tatas, and the other was acquired by Vedanta, which is Electro Steel. Other than these, even the companies which were supposed to find buyers, which had a lot of competition, have not yet been resolved. In fact, they're running the gauntlet of going through various levels of litigation, multiple litigation, repeat litigation. So the biggest of them all, which was supposed to, really improve the image of this government, was SR Steel. There was a 42,000 crore offer. ArcelorMittal had paid 10,000 crore already in order to qualify to bid for it. This is to pay back other debts of other companies in which they were involved. Nothing has happened. It is still winding its way through the courts. Let's see what happens when there's a new government installed, but SR is not going to be resolved before that. While we are in the middle of this very polarized and heated election, you had the collapse of Jet Airways. 20,000 jobs lost. Why is this happening? Why is it that we cannot seem to handle bad loans? My answer is quite simple. It is because our government, the bureaucrats, the regulators, and banks work together in a very collusive manner. In fact, a very senior banker who we know is very fond of saying that all regulation should either be rule-based or based on principles. In India, it's neither. It is based on the person, or should I say based on the crony involved. So if you are part of the crony club, all rules are bent. If you are not, then nothing moves for you. So I'm going to discuss 2 cases today. One is, of course, Jet Airways. Now let's look at what happened. We all know that it collapsed. The 1,500 crore that was going to be injected by State Bank of India and other lenders did not happen. The airline has bit the dust. People are without a job. To my mind, Naresh Goyal, who's the promoter of Jet Airways, he signifies the ultimate crony. He has managed to make the system dance to his tune all these days. I also think that he was betting on the fact that we are in the middle of an election and he would manage to extract mileage and extract concessions again. So things came to the brink just as campaigning was supposed to kick off, right? And which government wants 20,000 jobs lost when it's already under pressure about not creating jobs? Why didn't things work out? Because though SBI went and announced a 1,500 crore bailout, a very dubious deal where Naresh Goyal pretended to step down, was lurking in the background, and was all set to come back and try and rebid. They did not go the insolvency route. They did not go to the bankruptcy court. Why did it work? Why did it fail? Because, believe it or not, my banking sources say that there were non-stop calls from Delhi pressuring bankers to make this bailout happen. And bankers refused to listen. That good reason why they wouldn't do it. Apparently, bankers said, please give us instructions in writing to release 1,500 crore more. Why do you think bankers were reluctant? My guess is because Jet has no assets. All the aircraft, that its main assets are its people and the fact that it has, so many routes and planes in the air. When that gets grounded, there are hardly any assets. Even the planes that it had were on wet lease. That means the lessors are going to take them back. Some others were secured by other collateral, like the US Exim Bank had first right against some of the loans extended to Jet Airways. Our bankers have really nothing, and yet they had extended 8,500 crore, did not put a person on the board, did not ask Naresh Goyal to pledge all his equity. He still held 31% and did not ask him to bring money until it was on the verge of collapse. So bankers were already on a very, very sticky wicket. Now they lend another 1,500 crore, which would have been good money thrown after bad, with no assets to collateralize, even though the official statement to the stock exchanges actually pretended there's going to be some collateral. So I don't blame the banks. They refused to sign on the dotted line. Banks also did this because a bit of learning from history. Remember Kingfisher? Kingfisher Airlines, another well-run airline, which again played this kind of game of brinkmanship, trying to arm twist people into giving it further loans, has an outstanding debt of 9,000 crore. It collapsed in 2012. In 2017, the former chairman of IDBI and 3 other bankers and some others from Kingfisher Airlines were arrested. The promoter himself is merrily sitting in London, taunting the government. They haven't managed to bring him back, though that is inching forward. So some others are in jail, paid the price, maybe because they didn't take instructions in writing from another government. So who's to say what's going to happen after the elections, what kind of formation is in power, and why would any banker take the risk? But I'm not giving bankers a clean chit. Remember, they are the ones responsible for that 8,500 crore, which is not going to be recovered. In fact, what we know today is banks may end up writing off 80 to 90% of that money, which will eventually be paid by you and me, the taxpayers, because banks are perpetually capitalized, and these are public sector banks owned by the government. 70% of the loans come from there. Now let's look at another example. This is this company called Shree Renuka Sugars, which was led by someone called Narendra Murkumbi. It used to be the poster child of farm sector companies, did extremely well, was the darling of stock exchanges, then went through a rapid expansion, went overseas, made some wrong decisions, especially the overseas acquisitions, and of course the sugar industry has been through turmoil. The farm sector usually is. So it piled up debt, nowhere near Jet. It was over 2,500 crore. But Mr. Murkumbi played it differently. Unlike others, he didn't want that bad loan dumped onto the banks, so he decided to bring in a partner. He brought in Wilmar International, which is a Singapore-based company. It's one of Asia's biggest companies in the agri sector. Wilmar came in with a 25% equity stake. When this happened, the Securities and Exchange Board of India said it wasn't 25, it was 27%. SEBI, the market regulator, said 27% is a significant acquisition and you need to make an open offer to buy another 20% of public shareholding. Mr. Murkumbi and Wilmar did it. So you had one acquisition open offer that was complete. The bad loan problem still didn't get resolved. At this stage, Mr. Murkumbi was still in charge. His mother was the chairperson. He was the managing director and vice chairman. When the debt problem kept mounting, he persuaded Wilmar to increase its stake to 58%. They brought in more money. They also guaranteed the loans, and the company got a chance of revival. Now, what did SEBI decide? It says, okay, now there's a change in management. You have to make another open offer to the general public, or not the general public, the investors of Wilmar. They complied. That cost them another 800 crore. So, 2 open offers, as clear a takeover as possible is done. What happens after that? The RBI also was okay with it. Under the RBI's 12th February circular, which has been shot down by the Supreme Court recently, when there is a sort of bailout deal, the bad loans, when a new promoter comes in and brings in more money, the bad loans are considered standard. RBI was okay with it, conducted inspections, banks were okay with it. So on 22nd March, what the RBI does is it suddenly writes to all banks saying that Shree Renuka Sugars should not be considered standard because Wilmar was already inside, there is no bailout acquisition, and so the loans should not be considered standard, they should be considered bad loans. Isn't this stunning? But it happened. So what we read in the newspapers is that Wilmar plans to sue the RBI. Actually, it has denied it because nobody wants to go to court against a regulator. And in any case, who wants to go to court today? Look at the mess that is in the Supreme Court. There's talk about fixers. There is a three-member bench, which is looking at whether there's fixing in the Supreme Court. There's a sexual harassment case. Obviously, we are in a bad situation in India. Wilmar is not yet going to court. It's hoping that the RBI sees sense. My question is something different. Here is a company which does not want to dump bad loans on banks. When RBI issues a letter the way it does, is it not talking to SEBI? How can there be such divergent views between two regulators when they are sitting together on various high-level committees, and there ought to be coordination? When we file RTI applications, we notice that on many other things, RBI actually writes a letter to SEBI and asks for its views. Why wasn't it done over here? Why does it dash off a letter? Why does it want the loans to be considered bad loans? Because here's a company that is likely to be revived, which is good for the company, which is good for the economy, which is good for the employees who work over there. It is good for the system. And it's not as though RBI is, clean as driven snow, on the job all the time, follows the rules, the way they are supposed to be followed. RBI has been sleeping on its job. That is why we have bad loans of 8 lakh crore. In fact, much larger, but 8 lakh admitted. That is why we have a huge failure like infrastructure leasing and financial services, which was considered a systemically important company, and RBI just failed to monitor it even when it was systemically important. So what is being achieved by sending this letter without looking at facts? RBI, as always, has the attitude that it's my way or the highway. So one senior central banker has even written a letter to the media explaining why Wilmar is not to be considered a promoter who's coming in to bail out this company, when the facts very clearly show otherwise. As I said, in India, we destroy various regulations and various statutes by this capricious action by regulators because they are not answerable to anybody. The politicians who make phone calls are not answerable to anybody. And somebody who follows the rules, if he doesn't bring in political clout, may get the kind of treatment that Shree Renuka Sugars does. So the buck, as always, doesn't necessarily stop with crony industrialists alone. They take advantage of a bad situation, they arm twist, but they do it because our regulators and policymakers allow them to do it. Thank you.